Good morning, everybody. For a while now, organisations have been looking to better align their infrastructure, their services and processes with cloud-native technologies. And but as we know, as the COVID-19 pandemic, I keep saying I won't mention COVID, but I will. Relying on a lot of this on-premise legacy infrastructure created challenges for the way we work, and of course the way we now work in this kind of forever hybrid workforce. And one specific example that we'll be talking about today with the panel is around an organization's ability to provision, manage and secure user devices in a cloud-first world. Now that we, of course, have employees located not only all over the country, but with people working different shifts, working in the office, working at home some days, or even working at home full time. I'm Bob Quickenden. I'm the CTO here at Cisilion, and today in our monthly Fireside chat, we'll be discussing the future of modern device management. As always, I'm joined by my very good-looking panel of customers who will be discussing with me their unique points of view as they represent their own organizations across different sectors and, of course, their own levels of experience and cloud maturity. So today we'll be talking about what we mean by modern device management. Can we really achieve a zero-touch self-service approach to deploying and managing devices? How do we overcome the barriers of legacy IT, particularly around VPNs and on-premises services and things? Is this an evolution or a revolution? How do we get to cloud-managed endpoints? Is this something we have to rip out and replace, or is it something we can do gradually? And one of the areas I think is really important as we move forward is how do we measure and ensure the best possible end-user experience? So welcome to our Fireside chat. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining me. It's great to have so many of you on the call today. So let's kick off. You can all wave if you like. So just to kind of introduce, if I look, back in the day, and certainly when I used to do a much more technical hands-on job, IT used imaging technologies to load Windows operating systems and often deploy applications onto devices before they were given to employees, and we kind of walked through the final setup and configuration of those things. And whilst many of us have moved past that, and we can now push applications out via central management and those things, I still work with lots of organizations that are still a long way away from what I would see as a very streamlined and sort of cloud-first automated process. I still see customers where, if devices break or become unstable, they have to take them back to IT or ship them back or come back in the office, and IT will try and fix them, re-image them, tweak them, do whatever they do. And IT still have to manage, in many cases, different images to handle different drivers and different device types and different versions. And in fact, we were just talking about things like peripheral devices and docks and those things today, and some of the challenges that can have. So I thought it was a really good opportunity for us to talk about this shift. Certainly the customers we're working with at the moment, this is quite high on their agenda. And I'd go as far as to say, most of them, the previous ways and the current ways in many organizations of managing devices now are no longer practical, right? They don't work. They're clunky, they're chunky, they certainly aren't in the keeping of a kind of cloud-first hybrid approach. So I wanted to kind of open the first question to the panel, really, and see, firstly, do you agree with my statement, right? So is traditional device management no longer effective? And if so, why is it not effective in supporting today's hybrid workforce? Who wants to go first? I'm going to pick on Roland after you.
I'll give it a shout. So for us, as a relatively small organization, we've got just under 100 people, but we still have people in 5 or 6 different locations, and that means that we need to be able to get them devices and get them devices which can effectively self-configure once they're turned on, and that's something that we find Intune is very powerful for. So that ability to take an out-of-the-box device, register it on the portal, and then when that device is turned on, you are required to sign into Leithwaite's IT, and as soon as you do that, it then starts downloading all the things it needs and applying all the configuration that it needs in the background, is incredibly powerful for us. It has let us just have our users acquire local devices in their own countries without us having to have them visit one of our central offices or have someone go out to their home location. and that's been very useful for us. And certainly we find that it is considerably more flexible and configurable than the previous ways of doing things. We don't generally tend to do completely unattended, unassisted. So we have found that in offices where we have a number of people, it works best to still have someone with a bit of IT nous actually be the person to turn the device on the first time, get someone to let them know their password and log in so that they can do that first build and get everything down in the background while the person is still working on their old device. But then we can make sure their new device is ready to go. And if we aren't in a position to do that, as was the case, for example, with these staff in Canada I kind of started by talking about, we can walk those people through an end-to-end experience out of the box through to a fully configured, fully in line with all our policies device without needing to get any hands from IT on it at all. But we just find it actually ends up with a slicker end user experience where they're not sat waiting for several hours of downloading things in the background and so forth, if we can do that stuff on the new device that's going to be handed out to them in advance. So it's a bit of a hybrid, but for us, we certainly find that works well, and we find it works better than anything we've been able to try before.
Brilliant, thanks, Rowan. And Paul, I think you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, just to echo some of Roland's points, really. So we're an organisation of about 3,000 staff. We primarily have laptops, and we're just about to do a refresh. My big vision with Autopilot and Intune was that we'd be able to get to that kind of that Apple-esque experience where you get to take the wrapper off yourself, which always feels great, and just log in and everything just zips down and it's all fantastic. And I think there's aspects where we will do that. So if we've got someone with a broken device we need to swap out, I think then that's a good opportunity to get things done and people up and working quickly. I think the other side, as Roland said, though, is that you lose some of that face-to-face, that user engagement side where you provide some support as part of deployment. And if you've got a new user in an organization, sometimes it may reduce 2 or 3 early tickets that go to a service desk because they've had that opportunity to ask questions. So I think for me, as much as I'd like to be 100% kind of automated and seamless in terms of that experience, I think it will end up with a bit of a best of both. So I think we'll meet somewhere in the middle, and maybe part of it is customer choice.
Anybody else got a comment? Alex?
Yeah, so we've, similar to Roland, we've taken the Autopilot Intune approach to it. We traditionally were SCCM back in the old days before the pandemic, and that really forced, I think, everyone's hands on this call into having to do something different, because your workforce is suddenly, even though we were, toying with the idea of people not working in the office, and a few people were like that, we were still at that stage building machines via SCCM and shipping them from our offices to users' home locations. That obviously changed overnight, so we had to adjust our approach, and we've been, playing with it a little bit leading up to that, so it's sort of worked. But again, your hand is forced very quickly into adjusting your policies and procedures to accommodate that. I think it can, however, depend on the type of business that you're working for. If you have got users that are still in offices or in a building, and you've got an IT presence on site, it can still help, and I think it's still worthwhile moving to that. But it can be, I can understand why it would be a slower move to a cloud technology. You've got an existing system that works well. Probably you've got IT teams like we had that for years had grown up with SCCM and knew all of its ins and outs, so could get things done very quickly. However, for organisations like ours that are essentially fully remote now, albeit we do have office presence, we have users that are being recruited in all sorts of different weird and wacky places, and we have to just literally give them a laptop or provide them with a laptop, and the autopilot method works, and it allows us to also not necessarily require it back if it's being passed on to someone else, and they can do it remotely that way. We can just remotely wipe it and get it presented, set up for the next person. So it's been a godsend from that perspective. But then you move on to the app management, which is also part of that, which also has its set of challenges to make sure that's done. But for the initial deployment of machines and remote management and wiping, etc., then Autopilot or Intune, from my perspective, is at this stage the only way to go.
Great. No, thank you. And so I'll ask one that's not answered. So I think you've all spelled out some really great advantages of actually doing those things, and it sounds like a lot of you are well on that journey as well, and your experiences are actually really interesting. Outside of that, so for those that haven't spoken yet, so I'm going to pick on Aidan and David and Madassa. Outside of that kind of provisioning point, what other key advantages do you see in kind of moving to that cloud managed, deploy anywhere type technology? Is it around user experience? Is it around less resource? Is it around an easy job for IT? What's the key driver?
So I guess from our perspective, the hybrid working model without a doubt has driven much of our approach to use and utilize the cloud offering. And I think it's fair to say that the autopilot feature in terms of rollouts and deployments is probably one of the key objectives from our perspective. But the ability to manage the devices from any location, specifically for us, especially when we've now just acquired a company in Scotland, it's allowed us to onboard them into our platforms and essentially roll out their laptops from London securely in the same manner, using the same configs, using the same policies that we've deployed amongst our staff members in London, but for our colleagues in Scotland. And that's where the advantage has been, especially with the recent acquisitions. And interestingly, given the location differences, it's allowed us to then deploy the applications through Intune far more easily through the requests that we've had. And we only literally actually went live over the weekend. So this weekend I've been working since Friday through to Sunday to get them on board. And I must say that without this Intune cloud management offering that we put in place, it would have been far more difficult to roll out without a doubt.
I mean, what great timing, right, for a show. No, I mean, amazing. David, any thoughts? I know it's something you're looking at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really about efficiency and consistency, just like Madassa's just said. For us, the support team now can, boot a laptop up, log somebody in. I tend to agree with some of the other guys where we tend to do it on behalf of the user because they can continue to run and we can help them. And then for me, that handover process, how it stands at the moment, means that we can try and avoid those support cases for the first day or two when it's slightly different, slight configuration. Yesterday I actually autopilot a machine for myself, and it gets 95% there. There's just a few minor things that, personal efficiency, personal preferences that I think you need to change. I know Microsoft have got a lot of syncing technology. It'd be good if we get the rest of those things synced so that it isn't, having to adjust your browser every time and adjust your preferences and stuff like that. But I know it's coming online. But then it's the consistency. For me now, I'm sure, 100% sure on each device has the same base build, same configuration, going to be updated the same way. The users have as long as the group membership's right, they have the right level of software. The software is then kept up to date. So it's really around consistency. The manual processes worked, but it was different engineers did different things, and it wasn't quite the same. So now that consistency is the essential part.
Excellent. Aidan, you've been the quietest so far, but I'm gonna fire my next question probably directly to you. So I know you're an organisation that has always had lots of legacy infrastructure, right? So for Go via Thameslink, is autopilot and this zero touch model on the roadmap? Are there some really pressing things that are going to challenge that and stop you doing that, or have you got a completely different approach to how?
No, I mean, I'd probably class it as been on the roadmap. I can remember being shown, oh Christ, was it 4 years ago, by Microsoft, kind of a lovely power app sort of with a bunch of scripts to do your auto user provisioning from pillar to post, with sort of getting someone a nice power app. A manager says, oh, Bob's starting, Alice is starting. It goes through the HR process, it generates the account automatically, provisions the autopilot device, and then you can just ship it to their home. I suppose we're aware of it. We've looked at it. We've had bigger priorities. 2017, we were still rolling Windows 7 with a large image with everything fully loaded into it, and it was very much a a cottage industry, and kind of it was very high touch staff to change anything or do any installs above that. Our biggest task in 1819 was getting Windows 10 and 1809 and moving to an evergreen model of actually being able to push out and getting SCCM deployed, where we do a thin image and then layer everything on top of that separately using groups and sort of task sequences. We got that in place for 1809. The big challenge then, which we were sort of well on our way through pandemic, was getting to 20H2 in effect, or sort of getting 1809 out there everywhere and stripping out our Windows 7. And then off the back of that pandemic, we switched to always on VPN. So we've got the remote management capabilities, and we know we can manage the devices remotely. So that was our big leap forward in hybrid. It's yeah, kind of the regrets you have. It's like, yeah, it was on a roadmap for September. We suddenly needed to do it in 2 weeks in March instead, either side of a timetable change. So it's things you would have done in different orders if you'd known what was going to happen. But yeah, that's life, isn't it? So from our perspective, we got sort of 1809 was the big step forwards, and our biggest task there is basically at the time we had 7 different fleets of trains, and they ranged from 0 to 40 years old with varying different bits of kit on them. And if you can think of a physical media transformation to sort of get data off trains, we still use PCMCA cards with some systems. So there was a huge effort to get a sort of I suppose for want of a better word, a containerized app solution which would work with our legacy stuff and still do serial across USB. We got that out of the way. The biggest ongoing difficulty with that is that suddenly you kind of want to go from 1809 to sort of 20H2 or 21H2, which is where we are now with Windows 10. You're suddenly in the territory of you have to test everything with the train, and that train may come in once every 3 months and might take 2 hours to test. So that I suppose where we are is we got to SCCM. And when we got to SCCM, most of our pipes to our sites weren't big enough to push an image over it. We take out the front end services. So we spent a couple of years swapping all our pipes, getting all these sort of different circuits across from MPLS to SD-WAN, getting about 5 times bandwidth for less money into those sites. So with modern secure kit on them. So that was the bigger challenge in between. We're now rolling 21H2 for Windows 10, I should say. And anything new we deploy is going out with that. We're still in that mode of staff come in for an induction. If they're going to come in for an induction, it's easier for us to actually build the device and give it to them an induction when it's fully baked, ready, and we know we've burnt it for 24 hours. We know the encryption's worked. They've checked all the task sequence checks to make sure the right application stack for that person is down there. Will we switch to autopilot? Yeah, we probably will at some point.
I think we might have lost Aidan's. This is posed in a nice place now. I think we might have lost Aidan's internet connection there for a moment. So we'll carry on while he looks gazingly at us all. Anybody else? So I mean, Paul, I'll pick on you actually as a larger, as a large organisation as well. From a legacy infrastructure perspective, have you got kind of any pressing barriers? So I mean, the things that jump out at me are hardware-based authentication and those kind of things. Organisations have old non-modern authentication applications that still require VPN access or Kerberos or any of those kind of horrible things that don't really work in a modern approach to doing IT.
I think we've kind of muddled our way through some of those challenges recently. So we've had lots of apps that have been outside of single sign-on. We've also had some apps that we've been moving to Azure and things like Intune and things like that. I mean, the biggest challenge we've got though, I think, is around the kind of server estate around legacy. So I say server estate, I mean Windows OS, SQL, and the like. What we've done there is we've made sure that when we're doing a finance upgrade, that we actually bake in some of the technology changes we need to do to keep things current. So if finance come to us and say we need to move from this version to this, we say, well, actually, yes, we can support you with that, but at the same time, we're going to move you on to latest OS, latest SQL. The other challenge we've got at the moment is the IE10 end of support. So that's one that's on the face of it, not a big change, but actually when you think of the amount of testing we've got to do across our application estate and the tolerance for risk for things going wrong and not being able to support customers. It's that's probably one of our bigger question marks at the moment, is how we deal with that. And at the same time, obviously, from a technology point of view, we've got great tools such as Intune and all these management consoles, but actually, pushing it out is the easy piece. It's the testing it and getting that that confidence, I guess, that's the harder piece. I just wanted to say one more thing as well, actually, around kind of that workplace tech side. So 3 years ago at L&Q, we had lots of infrastructure people that were kind of generic in their role, and we had a few people that were more specific around network skills. What we didn't have was anyone that really took responsibility for kind of workplace.
Oh no, he stopped at the critical moment.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you stopped at the critical moment there.
Okay, where did I stop?
You were talking about how you had people that were kind of, generic across stuff, and you never had anyone specific around.
So we never really had anyone that was responsible for workplace tech, and for me, that's the whole piece around experience, right? It's about the employee experience with the technology.
Again. I think they need a few more people in that team.
From Office 365 to Surface devices and Intune. And it's been it's a growing team for sure, but it's it really shows the change in mindset around. It's not just about the tin and the networks anymore. It's also about making sure that the experience is right for people. And at the moment, we're just investing in kind of digital experience management tools, so we can end to end see where there may be contention on lines or when people may have issues, and we can hopefully preempt some of those challenges.
Anybody else doing a similar thing? So we touched earlier on about the importance of end user experience, and I guess with people working remotely and confidence in using the IT and those things, is anybody else looking at whether that's endpoint analytics and some of those things, or third-party products? Is there anyone else?
I'll just jump in here quickly. So to echo all the other comments there. So one of the things we found quite early on was, we thought autopilot would be the panacea. It was going to fix all of our problems. We're in the beginnings of the pandemic, but we found quite quickly that even though on the surface it's easy to autopilot a machine, a bit like David, every now and then there'll be a few issues. And we found, for example, that as it was installing applications, users would not have the device plugged in, so the battery would run out, or their Wi-Fi was too slow or too spotty, and it would never finish the installation. So we ended up then adjusting our process and shipping an Ethernet cable in every device that was sent out, and explaining as part of the guide that we sent to new starters to make sure it's, if you can, plug it into your router, just to guarantee, and also plug the power in. I know that sounds silly, but you'd be surprised. To make sure that the experience meant that the users could actually get online as quickly as possible. We've now changed it. Now that our offices are back open, for our bigger offices like the UK and Berlin, we'll actually ship devices to our office. And now that we've got an IT presence in the office again, we'll white glove all the devices and ship them from our office, still to the user's home, or they can pick them up from the office. But it just means that we can make that experience a little bit more seamless for the end user. And in theory, within 20 minutes, your machine should be operational. It might still be downloading stuff in the background, but after 2 or 3 hours, when new starters on their first day are having an experience where the machine's not doing what they're expecting it to, it can quickly go south. We've also, to touch on your current comment, Rob, we've also recently set up a modern workplace champion position in IT. For that very thing that Paul also mentioned about, it's not just about the device itself, the physical device, it's about how you can use all the software and collaborate. We take it for granted that we know what Office and how Office works, but you've got young people coming into the industry that haven't used these tools before. And it's even harder when your entire IT team are also remote, so you don't have that hands-on, or as much of a hands-on training. So we've recently hired a modern workplace champion to kind of take that element back to the business and to try and find out what the problems are. At the moment, if a user tries to use their O365 account to authenticate a new app or service, it will be blocked. that goes to the modern workplace champion. They can see what they were trying to do. And if we already have a tool that does that same thing, we would reach out and explain that this is what you should try and use first of all, and just try and gauge what the user's doing. Because otherwise, on the management front, you can end up with hundreds and hundreds of apps connected with your data going all over the shop, and you don't know, where it's going. So it's a big thing for us to try and do those, as you said, the endpoint analytics to work out where the pain points are. Bit like David, every machine should now be standard. You shouldn't really have any deviations from that, and everything is pushed out and managed remotely. But having that user experience and ensuring that you've got part of IT is not just about giving the device out, it's about ensuring that the user can use it and the services to its full potential. And so we found having that modern workplace champion, as we call it, allows us to now start that journey internally as well.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Alex. And I think, as you say, there are so many organizations that the users just, as you say, we take it for granted. We work in this space, but, that don't know how to use, not just how to use the applications that they've got. So they use the basics, and they almost feel, quite often there is a bit of it feels like an insult if you're telling people, well, you need to get the best out of these products. They update all the time now, right? There's an update every month for pretty much everything. So it sounds like what you've kind of created is almost this kind of like, success champion or client success or customer success type role that's there to kind of drive, I guess, positive adoption of the technologies, to make them aware of the things that they've done. And I think, I read a LinkedIn post yesterday actually that someone put in saying, we've IT had blocked OneDrive or external sharing, I think it was in OneDrive, and so they'd found a massive use of like Dropbox within the organization, and people were paying for it on their credit cards because IT had stopped them from collaborating externally. So we'd just gone and found something else to use. And I think they're great examples that we see everywhere. And I think obviously what you're doing is trying to circumvent that. So actually you've got someone there that is that, that trusted coach, if you like, to kind of show them, actually, we have invested in this technology. Here's what we have put in place. Here's how to get the best from it.
Yeah, it certainly is trying to stop shadow IT, and yeah, we've had this same sort of problem. But it's also about explaining to the users why we do it that way. We're not trying to be the barrier. We want them to, we have given them, they've got very good tools, but as you mentioned, the tools are changing almost weekly. And whilst we enjoy that technology, there's not enough hours in the day where we can do our normal job and then go and evangelize how you should be doing X or Y. And so it stops that shadow IT, and it also, hopefully prevents IT from being the bad guy, and that, we're not doing this just because there are very valid security and other reasons, but to also get the most out of the tools. Yeah,
good point. And Roland.
I was just going to chip in with a bit of a part of our approach now in our normal deployment is to have a half-hour handover session with people for their new Surface Pros when we're handing them out. And that is just an opportunity for us to have some face time with people, because normally people only come to us when they get completely stuck. They have the little things that they're definitely not doing them in the best way. And just having a little bit of time where that's in their diary and it's in the diary of one of our guys, they can go and they can say, well, look, do you know how to do this, this, and this? And if they don't, they get the opportunity to do it, or remind people about the ability to use LastPass, which is our chosen pass manager, for example, password manager, and explain that having that in place makes so many things easier. And just kind of those little bits of, here's a few things you might not know that you can do on the new laptop. Some of them you could do on the old laptop too, but we don't bother making a point of that. We're just trying to make the point of here is stuff that you can now do, and try and get people as much as possible to be doing best practice things, because we know that the reality is we can send out all the emails we like on the best ways to do things, and people don't read them. So that kind of face-to-face time is definitely the best way.
But actually is how do the rest of you do that? So do you have a formal way? And I like your approach, Alex, of having those dedicated CSMs and to do those things. And one of the other customers I work with has got, they've got 18,000 people, but they've got several hundred of these CSMs, right? And they're doing things around Beaver at the moment and stuff. So they've got people really trying to get within the organizations, trying to help them, collaborate and share content differently, stop sending emails to everybody, do it through these kind of ways. But do any other of you kind of do that on a more formal basis, kind of adoption and change and ongoing kind of training and awareness, or is it quite ad hoc? Dave.
Which go now? Yeah. So certainly pre-COVID, we had lunch and learn sessions. So I think they were probably the best way that I was able to engage with the colleagues across the business. I think we all see the emails go out. We still send the emails out. Here's a new feature. Here's something that's happened. Here's a change. Here's why you can't do something. Here's why you should do something. But in reality, getting face to face with people, I think, is the essential way forward. And for us, lunch and learns, and we're looking to re-engage with that approach now, just because, as Roland said, if you can spend that half an hour with them, even if it's a small group, I think you just get it across. And a point on new technology. So we've been deploying laptops with Hello capable laptops for a couple of years for now. We actually did a quick review of how many were in use, and there was a higher percentage than I'd like to see of people that were not actually making use of that technology. So either they were not aware of it, they got missed on the induction or something like that. So there's an example of something that's going to really help the employee and help them engage with the password management and the lock-in and control of their device, and they're probably not aware of it.
Yeah, it also goes, I think, on to the next point I wanted to ask about was security, right? And Dave, you touched on this at the beginning before we kicked off. But I think, security is another key thing, right, that everyone talks about. And, there's a big push, obviously, by all the big players to move away from passwords finally and all those things. And but I guess, that having a consistent build, having some of the things actually you talked about around just not allowing anyone to, install any app that they sign into and those things, and having some protection in place, do you see that as driving, firstly, do you see that kind of modern cloud approach of improving that security posture? I think a lot of you would probably agree that from what you said today, but also, is there then more that we can do to make that experience, and you touched on like Windows Hello and that kind of passwordless approach of just making things just work for people? Is there a lot more to be done around security governance, configuration of devices, do you think? And does autopilot and things play a part in that?
I think the conditional access policies that Microsoft Intune allows you to configure makes it far more easier for us to deploy devices in a secure manner. And I think once you've got the config set up in the cloud, the actual deployment process is quite seamless. I mean, the only issues that I guess staff probably face is when they're prompted for their MFA, right? And let's face it, there is a need for MFA, two-factor, especially for the use of Office apps and when you're signing in locations that are not whitelisted. So what we've done in the Office and what Office is, we've whitelisted the IP addresses so that the Azure and Authentication understands that you're in an approved location. Now, outside of that demise, yeah, let's face it, we may be prompted for an MFA, but that is only driven by, I guess, the Microsoft security protocols, where perhaps it finds a user signing in a risky location, which is great because it allows us to keep a close eye on user behavior when they're outside the office. We've deployed and we've tried to remove as many third-party applications as part of our Microsoft ecosystem, so removing the complexity of managing, say, another third-party AV system, just leveraging the Defender suite, and we use E5, so naturally you've got to maximize your leverage of those apps. And also, I think how can you win and get the buy-in from users? And Windows Hello has been a great feature for us. I mean, I was in the office a few weeks ago, and I had my CEO stick his head down in front of his camera just to sign in. I mean, in a very awkward angle, just to log in, which is great. Yeah. I don't actually think he remembers his password, but yeah, we've also extended the password refresh cycle now as well as a result, naturally, because I think we're seeing a lot more adoption with the use of Hello. And finally, and most importantly, we are looking at passwordless authentication, which is another feature that Microsoft have released, which basically means you can use your Authenticator app to sign into approved resources. So that's on the radar for this year. We are testing it amongst IT. It seems to work, but again, that's a new concept which can drive, again, further adoption and buy-in. You don't want security to be a hindrance to your staff, which I think has always been the common threat within organizations.
It's quite a funny one with Dasser, isn't it? The passwordless thing. I'm on our internal passwordless pilot, and it's just great. And it's so weird now, the thought of typing in a password, particularly because I can never remember them. But I remember my little boy who's 6. he got given a Surface by Microsoft recently, and he's just, that's all he does is just sticks his face in it and signs in, and he tries painting his face, putting stickers on his face, wearing his glass, just to see if he can trick it. And it's incredible how actually little things like that, it's really funny little thing, puts a smile on people's face. People still think it's just so cool. Probably not the kids so much now, but it is great when I see it being used, internally or another organization, and just people walking up and at these things. It's just it's just great. Anyone else? Any comments on device security, passwordless?
Yeah, I suppose we're a mix of where David and Madassa have sort of both referred to things. It's like, Windows Hello, probably about a third of our estate before, in the last couple of years, probably about a third of our estate could do it. We've actually left it off with the tranche we're going to replace this year. Then every device out there will be capable of it, which is a portable device. So we're going to be turning it on. We're also swapping out most of our desktops, and we're buying monitors with cameras built in. Again, it's to sort of support the hybrid working piece, where you kind of go, actually, do we need to provide a desktop with a camera built into it, which they can use for Teams calls now, which we'd never have considered previously. So we've bought a bunch of those. So some of our desktops will become Windows Hello capable as well by the end of the year. So it's funny. It's been there. There's been a pilot group for a couple of years, but it's kind of like we never had the. It was always that kind of a, do we turn it on before everyone can do it?
Yeah.
And we kind of went, no, we're not going to turn it on before everyone can do it, because a bunch of the older laptops we'll be replacing this year didn't have an IR camera. So back when they were buying those, the spec didn't include an IR camera, so it wasn't capable, full stop. And then we've chosen to push the desktops forwards at the same time. Madassa talked a bit about conditional access. Yes, same here. We've a group of staff who didn't necessarily get issued a personal device, a company device, and had strong views about having the Authenticator app on their personal phone. So we ended up sort of actually saying, yeah, okay, then we'll put you in a block list. You can't use your cloud services outside the office, but if you're on a known GTR IT site with an IP range, then yes, you can log in with that MFA. We're moving MDM solutions, so we've transitioning from another solution to Intune. So again, as part of that, then it's made it a lot easier for our staff, because they're not getting as many MFA prompts, because suddenly it's a known GTR device again, tied to Intune. So that's made it simpler for them. I think passwordless is on the horizon. We similar to Madassa, we followed the NCSE guidance and kind of went with, we don't reset passwords now until something suspicious happens, or until the staff member chooses to. We enabled self-service password reset, which did do a great bit of work for our service desk, and kind of integrated that with sort of CA and MFA to sort of allow us to sort of make that a lot easier for staff, really, to sort of self-serve. So I think we're on a journey there. There's always more things you can do. It's just choosing when to make sure we don't hit the staff with too many changes at the same time, really, as much as anything, because there is that adoption piece of how much change are we forcing, and a lot of our staff are field-based, and adoption sounds great until you kind of go, well, if I'm going to release you from your day job, I have to pay for someone to do that day job whilst you've been released, and that's kind of half a day or a day. So suddenly, if we start looking at some of the frontline staff, that can be quite a serious cost if they're not driving a train.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's difficult looking at how we engage and sort of improve their sort of things, and how we sort of slot into regular training days they have and things like that instead. We do have one person doing adoption internally with some support externally, and they're focusing on our onboard staff at the moment. So they're looking at how they use sort of a Android mobile phone with Teams, and it's very much focused on sort of Teams and sort of how we can sort of embed that in that group of staff. And if that works successfully with one depot, then it'll be all the depots, and then similarly there we'll look at sort of some of the frontline staff in the stations and engineering depots off the back of it. But it's I suppose we're at the stage of build it for one successfully, and build on the knowledge where some depots have grabbed it, run with it, and sort of done stuff in an ad hoc manner. This is now let's try and get this into a managed manner with sort of AD groups, Azure AD groups behind it, to automatically put people in if they work out of that location, and kind of have a bit more of a managed structure, so that if they leave or change job roles internally, then it rips them out automatically or puts them in, to sort of reduce the overhead on managing it and sort of increase the security. So, but I suppose my adoption, more so because of a split of our staff, our adoption is more aimed at the frontline staff. Similar to Dave, we did a lot of stuff. We did a fair bit pre-pandemic with, in-person adoption with the sort of the users who'd have a laptop or a desktop, but that was more around BI and the data platform we were rolling out at the time internally, and a bit more around kind of familiarity with sort of going to Windows 10. I mean, I'm slightly dreading Windows 11 in the fact that the taskbar has centralized. It's kind of like, to a certain extent, you can move it.
You can move it.
Yeah, I know, but it's kind of like, but then to a certain extent, you kind of go, people are more likely to sort of have issues with a change of version of Office. If you're jumping a couple of versions forwards than that tends to more sort of spark the questions of where the hell's it gone? I mean, the great example was when they moved the search to the top in Outlook, and it's like, even though it pops up and they accept the pop-up, people still just read it and then forget it immediately and kind of go, where the hell's my search gone? Was a big thing on with some of our staff, really. But
I still think it's a funny thing between work and personal life, and there's always been a challenge around technology adoption. Is that, you know, people have an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever they have, or their TV updates. I mean, my TV updated. I mean, that was something we never thought we'd say 10 years ago. My TV updated, and the whole UI has changed on my TV. You know, my Virgin boxes are completely changed. But you just work it out because you need to and you want to, because you want to watch your program, so you kind of deal with it. And it still has always been that, you know, that challenge, isn't it? From the days of XP to 7 and 7 to 10 and 10 to 11 is I think we have that perception that users won't cope with it and therefore they won't like the change. And I think there are some that are like that, but I think we sometimes don't give our users enough credit, because you always hear the stories of the ones that, you know, it's awful, it's different, it's, you know, and ultimately an operating system for most users is about launching apps, right? That's kind of what it's about. And for me, it's a lot of those things that went in the initial release of 11. It's back in the next release, which is where most people, I think, will migrate in the next, you know, the next update, which is coming in a month or so. But little things like not being able to have, you know, nested folders of apps, you know, to me that was the biggest thing that disappeared from it. And it was weird because it went in Windows 10, right? The first release of Windows 10 didn't have it. I mean, it came back very quickly, but that's in the current new build of 11. But to me, that was the biggest thing that I missed. I quite liked my nested folder structures that I had in Windows 10, and now obviously it's now more mobile phony with your kind of app folders. But to me, that was that was still probably one of the biggest weird things of why that kind of ever went away. We've got a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to go round, because there's quite a few of you on the call. I thought it'd be good, you know, to ask your words of wisdom. And I appreciate some of you may overlap and say the same things. But if you had to give, you know, one piece of advice for any organisation that is still in that transitional phase of looking at Intune, looking at modern device management, that isn't there yet or been struggling with it, what would that bit of advice be? I think it'd be really useful to get the collective minds that we have on the call. So if it's okay with you, or I'm just going to pick on people individually in the order that you appear on my screen. So if that's okay. So I'm going to start with Madassa.
I would say, as part of your Intune deployment, consider consolidation as part of your work that you're reviewing. I think it's with consolidating, leveraging one single platform to deploy your application will make your life far more easier, I guess. I mean, having said that, you can package other applications and use Intune for deployment, but I felt using Azure and much of the native inbuilt platforms has streamlined our overall business processes as part of our Intune deployment. So consolidation is probably the key thing for me.
Good advice, Paul.
I think, you know, invest in the team. I think make sure they've got the right skills to be able to make the most of all these fantastic tools. They're changing all the time as well. So I think going from the old world where it's very, very burdening in terms of time to the new world where you can automate and you can do some fantastic things. I think make sure the team know what they're doing. It's a good opportunity for them to close that skills gap.
Good one, Alex.
I would actually echo that from Paul. I think that give yourself a lead-in time to actually get this rolled out. You know, we had to adopt it very quickly in the pandemic, and we thought we'd done good jobs, but there was a lot of legacy bits behind the scenes that we didn't realise was still actually being controlled by SCCM or other technologies that were required to make these things work. around policies and access to applications and configuration of the devices. So I'd say let your IT team play with it as much as possible in a real world scenario as well. Let them take devices home, let them stress test it and get all the different scenarios of how your users would be connecting and installing these devices together. Otherwise, you're going to lose the will of the users and the trust of the users, and it will be hard to get that back. So yeah, invest in your people and time it's going to take you to do it.
Good one, Roland.
I'd kind of echo some of that as well. With just get started, get your team of people hands on with it. Start simple and just build up and look at the way that you can layer things in. There are more and more things you can do. When I think to the first things, we've been using Intune for the last 3 or 4 years since we first got Surface Pros. We built them. We had a couple of days of time from someone from Cisilion to build our original Intune rollout, and there's an awful lot more stuff you can now configure with Intune than you could back then. And so yeah, get your team started, get using it, get on Google and start finding the extra things that you didn't know that you could do, because lots of other people have probably tried to solve exactly the same problem of how to do a particular bit of configuration or apply a particular restriction or something. And if they haven't, there's a good chance you'll find something out there where someone's asked and been told, yeah, you can't do that at the moment. You still have to run a PowerShell script to do it or whatever. But there's absolutely ways that you can combine these tools, but just get started and get on with it.
Very true. David?
Yeah, for me, echoing virtually what everyone else has said, I'd like to sort of reinforce one point really is around, you do need to get your team to do it. They do need to resource and the time to do that. But I'd almost be mindful of considering planning it a bit like a project with a time window though. Otherwise, everyone's testing it for a long time and it never quite gets out the door. So I think if you can focus it with a project, put some dedicated resource on it and try and have some milestones and end goals, I think you'll get the output that you actually need. And very much like Roland there, I think once you get the project out there, maybe have some check-in points every 6 months, because as we found working with Cisilion, the platform's evolving so rapidly. Every time we work with Cisilion and have a health check or a review of where we are, there's more features, more things added that we can add and add value to the business. So it's important to keep on top of those.
Excellent advice. And last but not least, Aidan, you at the bottom of my screen.
I suppose for me, it's being aware of how much feature parity is growing, as Dave has referred to and others have referred to. We're still SCCM, that works well for us at the moment, but then we're already starting to transition some policies across to Intune for certificate deployment for devices and things like that. So you don't have to do it all. I mean, once you go into a co-managed state, you can start moving stuff, or a hybrid managed state, you can start moving stuff over gradually and bit by bit. It doesn't have to be a big bang thing. It's for us, the risk of a big bang is probably too high, given that how much of an estate we've got deployed. But anytime we look at something, the question is, should we be continuing to do this in SCCM going forwards, or should we be moving it across? One of our biggest challenges is probably looking at our legacy application packages estate and sort of seeing what changes or testing we'll have to do to move that into Intune deployed as opposed to SCCM. Which
I think is your point, is about joining the dots and nicely back on some of the dust of what you said at the beginning about thinking about that wider picture and how we look to try and consolidate as we move those things forward. So fantastic. So I think we're out of time. I think we're going to start getting nagged by marketing to close down. So thank you. I think that was really interesting. I learned quite a lot from that today. I think I was impressed actually how far I know some of you are quite far advanced. I think I've learned a lot about what some of you have done, and hopefully the audience found this quite useful. I'm going to write some of the notes up, and we'll be sharing some of the tips that you kind of shared with the audience today. So again, thank you everybody, and very much look forward to the next show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone.